Welcome back, ladies. This season, we're spending a lot of time talking about difficult feelings and just living in the tension of difficult times or the both and, right? Where it's like we're thankful and content, but we're also feeling these other things, and just like how to live in that tension where it seems like we're experiencing like contradictory things, right? Contradicting realities. So I really wanted to dive into a topic that I've been learning more about lately, and that's lament. I recently went through this 6-week small group study with the Trauma Healing Institute, a curriculum from them, which is a part of the American Bible Society. And they spent one night talking about lament. And I'm telling you, as someone that's been in church my whole life, that's been a pastor's kid, that's gone to a Christian school, this is a topic I could probably count on one hand that I've actually heard being preached about and talked about. And it's probably been more so in recent years at that. So it's just been something that's been really eye-opening for me. And I want to share some of the things I've learned and talk about some ways that we can process these hard feelings, or maybe just like that tension that we're feeling when we're living in the contradicting realities, and how we can process that with the Lord. So thank you so much for joining today's conversation as we continue this journey of the beauty of becoming together. So I'm not sure if your experience has been like mine, but growing up in the church and just visiting churches and just being around like the big C church, not just one in particular, but just a common thing that I've noticed is it's really taboo to, or it was taught this way at least, to like question the Lord and to complain to him, or to take what we're going through and just being like, I don't like this. Like, what's going on, Lord? And like, why is this happening? And it was just always, whether it was like outwardly like spoken and taught, or whether it was just kind of the subliminal message, was that like that showed a lack of faith, and that showed that you were doubting, and that wasn't pleasing to the Lord. And so don't do it. But the problem with that is then that leaves us with all of these emotions and feelings and questions and thoughts that have nowhere to go. I mean, if you think about it, if we had these questions or issues with another human being, like the Bible literally tells us to like go to that person and let them know and try and make it right. You know, there's like a whole biblical process of going to that person and just sharing what's on your heart and what you've experienced. But it was just always kind of off limits with the Lord from what I was taught. But like I said, the issue with that is it leaves us with nowhere to go when we don't understand God, and when we don't understand why something has happened or hasn't happened. And that just leaves it just leaves a dangerous place in our walk with the Lord, because like what happens to all of that if we're not tending to that and processing through it with the Lord? Like, where does that lead us to? So, like I mentioned in the intro, I recently took this course that's through the American Bible Society, through Trauma Healing Institute. And it's this like small group course, which is really great because it's biblically based, but it also incorporates mental health best practices. So if you ever want to look up the resources, it's traumahealinginstitute.org. Just a little plug for them, because I do want to share one of the nights was on this topic of lament. They broke down what a lament is, and really just off the bat, when we lament and when we just share our frustrations and our feelings with the Lord, it's actually not a sign of a lack of faith. It's a sign of faith. And the reason that is because I believe that like the opposite of faith isn't like disbelief or doubt. I believe it's like indifference. In the Gospels, we actually see accounts of people who didn't have the faith necessarily, or didn't like ask for a thing in faith, and Jesus did the thing anyways, right? Like there were some people that didn't ask Jesus for a healing, but he approached them and they didn't even really necessarily have the faith. But Jesus did it anyways. But then it was like the Pharisees and the temple leaders and they were more indifferent towards Jesus, right? Like when he went into his hometown and was like, a prophet's not honored in his hometown, like they were indifferent towards him. So I think what we have to really be careful about is becoming indifferent. And I think that's what happens when we stop having real conversations with the Lord, when we quit being raw with him. And that's what like lamenting is about, is just laying yourself exposed and just being raw and real before the Lord. And if you're yelling, you're yelling. If you're crying, you're crying. But not like shutting ourselves off from the Lord and becoming indifferent. That's the dangerous territory. So I was taught bringing these things up to God was a lack of faith, but I'm realizing now it actually shows faith, because when you're still willing to bring something up to someone, like it doesn't even have to be the Lord, like it could be a relative, a loved one, a friend, when you're still willing to like bring up the thing that's hurting you or bothering you or that you're questioning, to process through that with them, that shows that you're still invested in the relationship. When you really have to begin to worry about a relationship is when you don't have that fight in you anymore, right? Like when you're just like done, and it's that indifference of like, I'm not going to bring it up because it's not going to make a difference, and I just don't care enough, and I'm not going to fight for the relationship anymore. And maybe we're not like consciously saying that, but in our indifference, like that's when it's dangerous territory for a relationship, because it's like, I'm not fighting for this anymore. And so that's been a really important shift for me in thinking of lament, because it's me bringing a complaint to the Lord, or the thing that's, the issue that I can't seem to work through. It's not a lack of faith. It's actually me showing that like, hey, I'm still in this. I'm still wanting to walk the spiritual journey out with you. I obviously still trust you because I'm coming to you with this. I don't know what to do with this. And so it's not a lack of faith. It's actually showing that you still have faith and you still want a relationship with the Lord. We see lament throughout the Bible. First of all, there's a book called Lamentations, which I feel like took me way too long to realize like, oh, that's about lament. Like Lamentations. Okay. And then obviously the Psalms, we see throughout all of the Psalms that it's really a book of lament. And so I think it's really this process with the Lord that at least the church in the West has like kind of cut off and ignored. But I really feel like the Lord's calling us to bring it back, because that is such like a huge part of the spiritual journey and process, right? Like not just for us, but it was for King David in the Bible. Like it was for different prophets of Israel that we read in the Old Testament. There's even, I think it's Jeremiah, that's the weeping prophet, so there's just like, this is something that's been right in front of my face in the Bible, but because I heard one thing, I kind of ignored what actually is biblical, right? It's in books of the Bible. So I just wanted to do an episode because I know this season might be bringing up a lot of difficult emotions and a lot of questions that maybe you've had for the Lord that have been ignored, but now they're like coming back up. And I just want us to be able to have the space to process them with the Lord. Like I don't want us to become indifferent. Like God can work with a lack of faith, and we see that in the Gospels. But when we see someone who's indifferent, like the Pharisees, like that's such a harder thing to overcome because of the heart posture of the person that's indifferent. So the trauma healing resources say that there are 7 elements that are included in a lament, and you don't have to necessarily have all 7, but they can include these 7 things, and they don't have to be in the order that I'm going to give them. And also you don't have to have all 7, but there are 2 that are absolutely necessary for it to be considered a lament. So I will share what those 2 are after I share the full 7. So the first is just an address to God. And so that's literally just acknowledging him, like, oh God, oh Lord, Jesus, like however you want to address the Lord. Then the second is to review God's faithfulness in the past. And so just bringing up times, where you've seen him come through for you in the past. The third is a complaint. So whatever it is that you're dealing with, struggling with, like being sure to mention that complaint to him. Fourth is a confession of sin or of innocence. Fifth is a request for help. Sixth is a God's response, which they said is like often not stated within the lament itself, but it can be. And then the seventh is a vow to praise or a statement of trust. So, like I said, the lament doesn't always have to have all 7 of these, and that it can be in a different order than what I just listed, but it does always have to have a complaint. And that's really important because I think that's the part sometimes that we want to cut out because we don't want to seem ungrateful or we don't want to seem like we're coming to him without faith. And then it also has to have a statement of trust in God. And so if you notice in the Psalms, like David or whichever psalmist you're reading, they do always come back to like, but your loving kindness, Lord, or, I know you won't fail me. Like they just kind of like come back to these statements of trust, or I will praise you all the days of my life, that like vow to praise. So it is really important it has to have like those 2 elements, but then it can have the other 5 or parts of the other 5 or just those 2. So what we did in the study of this night that we learned about lament is we actually had some time where we took out a piece of paper and had this as a template. And like I said, Psalm 13 is a great chapter to have open if you want something as a template from the Bible, and just like wrote out our lament to the Lord, the thing that we don't understand, the complaint that we have. And, I added several of the other elements in there too, of just like recounting his faithfulness and, requesting help. And it was just, I don't know that like anything necessarily changed about my situation when I did that, or like since I've done that, but it changed something in me where it was like, oh, like God holds space for this for me. Like these aren't things I have to conceal and hide from him, but like he's big enough to like have space for this. And of course, when you hear that, you're like, well, duh, he's the God of the universe. Of course, he's like strong enough and big enough. But like, honestly though, when we look at our walk with the Lord, like, can we say that we've always felt that freedom to go to him with these things? And not necessarily because of him or his character, but just because of what we've been taught or what we've believed, throughout the years. And so it was just like a really cool thing to be like, I can do this anytime I want with the Lord. My feelings are important and valid enough to be able to bring this before the Lord. Cause like, look at how often David did it in the Psalms. And I'm sure we're only getting like a really small picture of like all of the laments he ever said and wrote in his lifetime. Right. And so today I just want to encourage you. This is really all I have for this episode, but I want to give you a little homework now that you've heard this and you've listened to this, to when you get home, when you have some free time to yourself, to just kind of shut the door and spend some time with the Lord and just take out a piece of paper or your journal and just write a lament to God, the thing that you're questioning, the complaint that you have, the thing you don't understand. If you feel like the Lord isn't hearing your cries and your prayer, like put that in the lament. For some of you, like for me, this may be your first time that you've ever done this. I mean, I think I've prayed laments before without realizing that that's what that was. But I don't know, there's something about when you're writing it out and you're just spending time and you're just giving space and time to those things that have maybe been neglected in you, or that you've tried to ignore or push down, be out of good intentions of like wanting to come to the Lord with faith, and not seem like you're doubting or like you're discontent or any ungrateful or like any of those things. But I think it's just like, I'm excited to do this more throughout my walk with him, because it's just allowing me to be like fully human with him, and knowing that like he appreciates that and wants that and actually like hold space for that. So I just really encourage you, take the time away with him to write out a lament. And hopefully this can be like a practice moving forward that might feel weird at first, but hopefully it can be just a normal part of our spiritual process, because like I said, it was for people in the Old Testament, definitely like we see in the different books. And so, that's really all I have for this episode. So I thank you for listening, and I really do hope that you try this out and that it's as impactful for you as it was for me. So thank you so much, ladies, for joining, and I will see you next time. Thanks for listening to the Beauty of Becoming podcast. If you've enjoyed today's conversation, hit the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and select the bell icon so you're notified whenever new content is posted.